Hello YouTube! Today in the Naughty Librarian I am doing my full recap and review of What the Vampire Armand by Anne Rice. I am continuing on the Vampire Chronicles journey. So Vampire Armand is, well, it's about the Vampire Armand, obviously. It's kind of like his biography. And, yikes is how I feel for like a lot of the book. This is kind of like 50 Shades of Vampire with a dash of Lolita. Like it's alarming. This is probably also like the book with the most sexual content out of all of Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles, but it's not necessarily like the sex you want. It's kind of gross, and the power dynamics here are questionable at best. But I digress. Let's just get into what actually happens in The Vampire Armand. Okay, so The Vampire Armand is kind of Armand's biography. This is taking place basically at the very end of Memnoch the Devil, where Lestat, he's convalescing after his whole ordeal. He's kind of like catatonic, and Armand is there, and David is there, and David's like, hey, I want to write your biography, tell me about your life, and then Armand reluctantly kind of agrees, like, fine, I got nothing else to do. So let's just do all of the backstory before we get back to the present. So Armand's story really kind of begins when he was about 12. Like, definite ages don't really get mentioned all that much in the book, so I'm going to be guesstimating. He was basically kidnapped by like Turkish raiders out of his home country of Ukraine. And these Turkish raiders, they kidnapped him and they took him back to Constantinople. And he was a very pretty 12-year-old boy, so he was basically sold into sex slavery, and he gets passed around between masters in Constantinople, and then eventually, you know, he just snaps. He loses his will to live anymore, for obvious reasons. He doesn't eat or drink or talk or do anything. He's just kind of waiting to die. So it's a very sad, awful start to the story with, you know, child sex slavery. Yikes already. And one day there's this guy, and he's an older man, and he buys Armand. He takes him back to Venice, and he sells him to another guy. And the man who buys him in Venice is Marius Romanus, and he's kind of like a Michelangelo, a Da Vinci type. This is the Italian Renaissance, so it's like the 1500s, and he kind of renames Armand Amadeo, so we'd have more of an Italian name. So I'm just going to refer to him as Amadeo for a while, because that's the name he uses while he's in Italy. He goes by Amadeo. His real name is Andre, and he just kind of keeps changing his name. So we're going to refer to him by the name he's being called. It might get confusing, but like, welcome to my life. So Amadeo. And the whole deal with like Marius, he is very much like Michelangelo and Da Vinci. He just keeps adopting boys and kind of is having them be like, you know, not like servants, but like helpers. Like he's teaching them painting techniques. He gives them clothes and food, a place to live, and he like pays for tutors and like education for them. So he's kind of just running like, I don't know, like a foster home for young boys that he collects. And everything's pretty much fine for Amadeo at this point. Like, he's very much still mentally scarred, but no one's hurting him here. He gets to this big palazzo with Marius, and like everyone's super nice to him. All the other boys, they try to help him learn Italian and like how things work around the palazzo. They take him out around town. Everyone's really kind to him, and Marius actually takes a lot of special interest in him as well. A special interest though, like we're gonna get into touchy subjects here. For example, grooming, which I feel like does take place in this book quite a bit. Amadeo is about 15-ish, like he's still a kid. He sleeps in Marius's bed at night. You know, the master of the house takes a lot of special interest in him. And do things get a little sexy between the two of them? Yeah, they do. Like, kind of right away. Like, I would love to be able to say Marius just takes an interest in him in like a kindly, fatherly way. But unfortunately, nope, it's just distinctly sexual. That's what we're going to be working with. This whole book is very problematic. So just be aware. There's just tons of consent issues here, but overall, Amadeo seems very happy, and Marius does really deeply care for him, but it's just really murky power dynamics wise overall. But their relationship keeps getting bigger and growing more deeper because Amadeo starts letting Marius drink his blood. And Marius actually gives him like little tiny bits of his blood. And this doesn't make him a vampire though, because it has to be completely drained first and then have enough blood to refill to become a vampire. This is just like little sips and like little tastes and stuff. So it's just for sexy times between them. And Amadeo, he keeps asking Marius to give him the whole thing. He's like, I want to be like you. I know you're not normal. You're not a human man, maybe, because like you never come out in daylight and you drink my blood. Obviously, there's some there's some differences here. He knows like he has some type of dark gift, and he wants Marius to give him this dark gift because he wants to stay with him forever. And Marius keeps refusing him because Amadeo is far too young. He's 15. Mind you, you probably shouldn't be having sex with this kid either, but hey, at least you're not making him a vampire too. And then just the weird sex stuff just keeps coming, okay? Because Marius, he sends Amadeo off to like brothels. And he's like, I want you to learn what sex is actually like, because it's not all violent assaults like you've experienced for so long in such a young life. There's also non-violence and like consent is happening and stuff like that. I mean, brothels, still in this era, consent is a little murky, but the spirit of this is good, so we're just gonna go with it. And Marius, he basically pays for the works at these things, like several brothels, so Amadeo can just be with both men and women and whoever he wants and see what he likes best. So basically, he just goes on like a fuck wave through Venice. He's several brothels, he's with all of the women and all of the men and just does all of the weird, crazy sex stuff you could ever imagine. And he also learns he doesn't really have a preference in between men or women. He's just like, bodies are bodies, yo. Like, he's down to be with whoever. He has no real sexual preference. Amadeo does start to kind of worry that maybe him going out and like banging everybody is causing like some distance or tension between him and Marius. So he acts out by taking up with this like English nobleman, right? And he's the Earl of Harlech. And he's with him for like a few days, and the Earl of Harlech is like high-key obsessed with Amadeo, but Amadeo doesn't share this obsession. He's here for a good time, not a long time. And the Earl of Harlech is like, I'm gonna bring you back to England and you're going to be with me. And he's like, no thanks. And then there's some problems here. The Earl of Harlech is not a good guy. You should not be fucking with him, quite literally. So Amadeo eventually leaves him. He's like, this is too much. I am going to go over to Bianca's house. Now, Bianca's like a socialite in this era, and she throws a lot of parties. All the boys from the Palazzo know her. Everybody in town knows her. They go to her parties. Marius goes to her parties sometimes. Bianca's cool. And Amadeo and her kind of bang it out for a bit. Like, they get together for a hot second. However, they're both on the same page here, where Bianca and Amadeo are both like, hey, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. They're both in agreement, so this is a much healthier situation. But after, you know, his big fuck wave about Venice, it's finally time for Amadeo to come home to the Palazzo. So he comes back to the Palazzo, he wants to see Marius, and now Marius, he is having a jealous vampire meltdown. He's just rage painting at vampire speed, and it's freaking out all the other boys because they're like, why is he painting this fast? This is a lot to deal with. And then the drama continues because they have this full, like, lover spat with Marius and Amadeo. Like, it's been brewing for some time, and finally, now is the day where it's all gonna come to the head. And the drama. So Marius, he tries to, like, lock Amadeo out of the bedroom because he's having a meltdown, and Amadeo, he's like, oh, bitch, please. So he grabs an axe and he chops the fucking door down. And it's just insane, this relationship between these two. And then what leads from this situation of all of the drama is like a 50 Shades of Grey like punishment scene here between Marius and Amadeo, where he like takes a switch to him for misbehaving, and then he like, he heals the wounds after with his blood, so it's all good. Now that they have like officially just went into BDSM territory here, it makes the relationship between Marius and Amadeo clearer in general, because this really more feels like a dom sub situation where Marius is the dominant and Amadeo's the submissive, and they have kind of a fucked up jealous relationship with each other. But anyway, they make up and Marius tells him, hey, I have to go on a trip for a couple days. I have to go take care of those who must be kept, which we know, since we've read the other books, is Enkel and Akasha. He has to go take care of them because he has been their keeper for quite some time at this point. But before Marius is going to leave, Amadeo starts begging him again. He's like, please make me like you. Please give me this dark gift that you have. I want to be like you. I want to be with you forever. It is a little tempting to him. He's like, maybe, but he still turns him down for now. In fact, he goes so far as to be like, all right, fine, I'm going to show you what you're asking for. Let's go out in the town. So he grabs Amadeo, he takes him out in the town, right? And they're just going around showing vampires' greatest hits of atrocities because they fly around, they use super speed, and like Marius kills guys right in front of Amadeo and stuff to like really show him what this is like. But Amadeo still wants it because he's blindly devoted to Marius. They end up stopping by like Bianca's house too, and Marius is like threatening to kill her, which is like, oh shit, because like, Amadeo still likes Bianca. They're like fuck buddies. He doesn't want her hurt. He's threatening to kill her, however, because she's been poisoning people in her house. However, turns out she's being coerced into doing it by like other people in her family. These other guys are like coercing her into poisoning people like they owe money to. And so Marius, he makes a deal with her that he'll kill the people making her poison people. And mainly to please Amadeo, as well as he doesn't really want to kill Bianca either. So like he makes this big plan, all right, I'm gonna go kill some bad guys. Which is what they do. They go off after all of the bad men who have coerced Bianca. And they go to their like the terrible dude's party. It's just all bros having a bro party. So they all go. And Marius, he goes on a full murder spree throughout the party. He kills literally everybody there. Amadeo is frankly a little terrified because of all the murder, it's a lot, but he understands the lesson that Marius is trying to teach him, that basically, if you're a vampire, it's okay to kill if you're killing bad guys. I mean, it's not the best lesson to learn, but like if you're gonna be a vampire and have to kill people to eat, well, if you're killing bad guys, at least you're doing a public service. One of those situations. But after that, Marius has to leave for his trip, and he's gonna be gone for 4 days. 4 days. What could possibly go wrong? So as soon as Marius is gone, the most inopportune moment, the Earl of Harlech shows back up. He breaks into the Palazzo and he starts killing people. And these are little boys. Like he adopts little boys, like 8-year-old boys, and he's killing them. He's killing children. And he's like, Amadeo, I'm bringing you back to England with me or I'm killing you and everybody else. And they say romance is dead, am I right? Like, it's a whole thing. And they end up getting into this big sword fight, and Amadeo ends up killing Harlech. However, that little asshole Harlech, he put poison on his blades, and he had scratched Amadeo with his knife. So Amadeo is now poisoned, and he goes immediately into poisoning land. The poison's coursing through his body, and like his best friend Ricardo and Bianca comes over, and they're taking care of him, hoping he's gonna recover. Like maybe he didn't get like a full dose of poison because he just has like the one scratch. Everyone knows Marius knows some shit. Like he'll probably fix this, but he's not there. So they're really really hoping he'll come back soon and you know, Amadeo will survive long enough. Luckily, he does. Marius does finally come back and he finds Amadeo literally dying. And Marius is really struggling about whether or not he should turn him into a vampire. Like, time has gone on. Like, he's about like 16-ish now, you know? But ultimately, Amadeo is dying, so he relents and he turns Amadeo into a vampire because he can't stand to lose him. And while like Amadeo is, you know, dying and being resurrected as a vampire, he has like flashback memories because he has been repressing a lot of his original childhood memories from back when he was in Ukraine, like his original family, what he was doing there. It's all very blurry to him until this moment when it all kind of comes flooding back. Back in Ukraine, Amadeo was known as Andre, and he was a painter of religious icons, and he was incredibly realistic painter. He was like a prodigy child, and these monks like were keeping him underground and like doing religious stuff, and he was painting icons all day. And one day, like, his father came to the monastery where he was staying at, and he's just like, hey, get over here, I'm your dad, and I'm kind of a brute and an asshole, but I'm taking you away from the monks because it's creepy they live underground like mole people. Like, you're gonna come with me and you're gonna paint a lot of stuff and we're gonna sell it to the prince because he likes your work. So his dad just kind of takes him out of this monastery where he wanted to stay, even though the dad's kind of right. It was weird that they were mole people. It makes sense that he's remembering this because this is kind of what started him on his path to where he is now. It was his father taking him out of the monastery and then on a trip to go to the prince, because on this trip is when the raiders kidnapped him. So he's kind of reconnecting with like the origin story here. But once Amadeo, he fully turns into a vampire, he is arisen, Marius takes him out on the town to, you know, catch some dinner. And they hunt bad guys. They're doing a good job. They hunt, like, they find a thief and an overall bad guy. They eat him. They come back to the crypt, to get a little good nap for the daytime. You know, they're having a good time. They killed a bad guy and they went to bed. Full day. And then, you know, Marius just continues to tutor him about what it's like to be a vampire, the whole, you know, existential crisis of immortality, etc., etc., etc. And all of this, like, learning and introspection, it makes Amadeo much more curious about his home back in Ukraine and what had happened to it. He hasn't been there since he was a little child. So he asked Marius to take him back to Kyiv, where he's originally from. So now that we're going back to Ukraine, I'm going to refer to him as Andre, because that's his Ukrainian name. So they go to Andre's old village, and they find his family's house, and, you know, not much tact here, but he just kind of breaks in to the house, and his family's like, who the fuck are you? and he basically doesn't really have a good answer for this. Like, how do I tell them, like, hey, I'm Andre? So he just tells them, Andre's alive, and he sent me here to give you that message and a bunch of money, so here you go. And he, like, gives him a bunch of jewels and money and just runs off into the night. So dramatic. And very much like a teenager, right? You feel awkward, so you just ran away. And he goes off to go find his father, who's kind of become the town drunk in the years since Andre was taken. He always kind of thought that his father had died that day too, because they were being attacked by raiders. He thought his father got shot by a lot of, like, arrows and stuff, because his father was trying to save him. Turns out he didn't die. He's the town drunk now. So he goes and finds him at this tavern, and they actually have, like, a really good reunion. Like, he learns a lot more about his father. He doesn't see him as, like, this brute and this, like, asshole. He sees him more as, like, a strong, caring person who was literally taking his son away from mole people, not like how, you know, Andre saw it at the time. It's like, this is where I live. These are my friends. You're taking me from them. But, like, he sees things much more clearer now from his father's perspective. It's a whole really nice bit with the family. It's kind of poignant, and it really clarifies a lot of things about, you know, Armand as we know him now. It underlines why he's so religious, because he was raised super religious, and like through religion he always found a sense of meaning and connection to his family, and like painting the icons and stuff was how he expressed love. Like he found love for his family and love for the world through religion. So it kind of paints this picture about how he became so religiously twisted and is still very religious to this day. But speaking of love, Marius and Amadeo go back to Venice, and they get right back to their BDSM lifestyle. And, you know, Amadeo, he keeps getting the switch when he misbehaves, but like, I think he likes the switch, so he keeps misbehaving. One of those type of situations. And Marius, he's also trying to help him be the best vampire possible, so he teaches him how to interact with like humans and even, you know, love them in a way without letting them fully in on the secret, because you can't go around telling everybody you're a vampire. However, there are perhaps some more advanced studies behaviors here, because Marius and Amadeo, they go visit Bianca. They haven't seen her in a while after, you know, they killed all of her relatives that were making her poison people. So they go visit her and legit have a three-way with Bianca. Like, I was not expecting a vampire three-way, but like no actual like penetrative sex happens, because vampires don't really have sex in Anne Rice's world, but they can do other sexy stuff. You know, there's a lot of hand and mouth stuff happening here in a three-way. And that's kind of like Amadeo's like last real happy memory, because after that we get back to where we found Armand in the vampire Lestat. So basically, short version here, what had happened was like a cult of devil worshipping vampires break into the Palazzo one night, and they set Marius on fire. Amadeo assumes he's dead because like he's literally on fire. And they kidnap all the boys, and they take Amadeo, and they take him back to their lair. And it gets really gruesome for a while right here, because they just start burning the boys alive on this pyre they have. And they also burn Armand a bit, but they ultimately decide to let him live because he is a vampire. However, over the course of about 5 months, they just torture and starve him until he basically just loses his damn mind. Like, they trick him. Like, they even trick him into eating his best friend, Ricardo. Like, they kept Ricardo alive just so they could throw him into the cell they've been keeping Amadeo in, and he would eat him out of starvation. And then they keep throwing like other small children in the cell with them just to fuck with like Armand and like ruin his brain and break him. So he even starts seeing like the ghosts of his victims, because we do find out in Tale of the Body Thief that vampires can see ghosts sometimes. It's just like a thing that happens. And he is just like brainwashed and like losing his mind. And it's a really common brainwashing technique to torture this person so much that when you finally start showing them some type of kindness or mercy, they start to love the person giving them the kindness and mercy, even if it is their person who is their torturer. So after he's like fully brainwashed by them, they kind of let him out. And the coven leaders here are Santino and Alessandra. And they teach Amadeo all they know about coven law. And Amadeo, like, he's a quick study. He rises through the ranks of this coven really quickly, and he learns all about how they practice vampirism, where it's like a devil worship thing. They're like, God wanted us to be evil devils so we can show everybody else, you know, what evil is, and then they'll be good. So like, this is how we fit into the world. It's like a really like weird, twisted religious cult ideology, but he learns about it and takes to it really quickly. So about 6 months later, they actually end up sending Amadeo to Paris to be the leader of the coven there. And that's when he changes his name to Armand, because this is his new name. This is his cult name. His dead name is Amadeo. His new name is Armand. And he leaves for Paris with Alessandra, one of the leaders there. So they go to Paris, and then he's there for about 200 years. Until he finally meets up with Lestat in the 1800s, and all hell breaks loose. And now, since we've read the books, we kind of already know what happens here, because now we're back into the vampire Lestat. We're intertwined story-wise. And Armand, he just kind of goes through like his time with the coven. He led them. He met Lestat. Lestat destroyed his coven with Mr. Big Dick Energy over here coming in, fucking shit up. And it like really fucked him up for a while, and then ultimately the founding of the Theatre des Vampires, which Armand became like the coven leader of there too. All the way up until 1870 when Louis eventually burned it down. And we all know this stuff from the Vampire Lestat and Interview with the Vampire. We're just rehashing. However, we do learn one thing we did not already know. We basically learn a lot more about Claudia's death and things he never even let Louis in on, and he hid from him in his mind, because Armand at this era was also like moonlighting as a mad scientist, and he was doing crazy experiments and shit, and he had Claudia, and we all know Claudia actually died from being locked in a room with sunlight, but we don't know what happened with her between when Louis was captured and bricked into a wall and Claudia died in the sun. What happened in those hours? Well, let me tell you what happened in those hours. It's a lot. So back in Interview with the Vampire, just for context here, Claudia had made Louis make her a vampire mom. So she found this woman whose daughter died. She's like, I need a mom. I can't be with you. I need space, blah, blah, blah. Louis makes his vampire lady, and that's when everyone gets kidnapped. So Claudia and the vampire lady both die in the sun. And at this time, Armand, mad scientist that he has both the vampire lady and Claudia. He starts doing twisted fucking surgeries on them, where basically he cut off the adult woman's head, and then he cut off Claudia's head, and he sewed Claudia's head on the adult woman's body to try to give her an adult vampire body. Like, hey, does this work? You have a little tiny baby head on an adult woman body. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You can't just sew a head on another body and expect it to work. I mean, they're vampires, so technically this doesn't kill her, but yikes, this is a lot to deal with. So basically he just tortured her a whole lot before they finally put her out into the sun. Yikes! And like, this wasn't the first experiment he did. He was doing this all the time. He was running these twisted fucking experiments on all kinds of stuff. Oh my god! He doesn't really get into the times after 1870 where he and Louis were companions and they traveled around, especially in the United States. We all know how that ended. He doesn't even talk about it. I guess nothing important happened in all of those years, whatever. Now we're in the present. This all started because Lestat was convalescing and Armand came to visit him. And he ran into Daniel, and one day, like, he and Daniel were literally ghost hunting in the attic. And Daniel's like, can I write your biography? Tell me your life story. And they got a little flirty with each other too. And then like basically Armand's like, okay, fine. And here we are. We're in the present finally. Let's get into what new actions have been happening. In Memnoch the Devil, Lestat came back from hell with Veronica's veil and he showed it to them. He freaked out because, like, you know, he's very religious, and Armand stepped out into the sunlight as an act of worship to like self-immolate. So that's the last we saw of him. However, knowing that he's here now, we know that he didn't die in the self-immolation. And honestly, the book isn't really super clear about what actually happens when Armand did go into the sun, because he like hallucinates a lot of religious imagery, his parents, and that he somehow meets like these two humans, Sibel and Benji. And he met them while he was like going into the sun, because somehow he like killed Sibel's brother whilst this was happening because he had been beating her up for playing the piano, and Benji tried to stop the brother, but he couldn't. It's really unclear how all this happens, and I don't think Armand knows either, so that's why it's so unclear in the book. The next thing he knows is that he's falling from the sky all fucking burnt up from the sun, like extra crispy. Like, this guy is very burnt, and he falls into like the corner of like this like slanted roof thing in New York, and he sinks under a bunch of snow. And it snows for days and days and days, so the ice just keeps getting thicker and thicker over him, but it blocks the sun, so it gives him some time to heal a little bit. And he keeps like telepathically looking in, listens to Sibel like playing the piano, and eventually he's like kind of strong enough to speak telepathically to Benji. And he says like, hey, I need to get rescued from this icy roof. So Sibel and Benji are like, yes, we'll do it. What do you need? So Armand like leads them to him like, Professor Xavier kind of style, and just like, hey, come get me out of the ice. So they run out, they got ice picks and blankets and shit. They're like, all right, let's go. So they're basically already willing to do anything for this guy, even though he's like this extra crispy bog man. Like, he's just disgusting looking. They chip him out of the ice, they wrap him up in a blanket, they drag him back to the apartment. And eventually Armand tells him like he needs to heal. Like, he doesn't normally look like burnt up bogman. I need to find an evil person to eat because I don't eat good people. I need to find a bad guy and I'll eat them and then I'll heal. And Benji's like, I got this. I'll get you a bad guy. No problem. I'll be back in like 25 minutes. BRB. By the way, let me explain Benji and Sibel a little bit more because they're just not in the book that much. But Benji is like some little orphan kid that Sibel's brother bought like off the street in like Egypt. And he's like, hey, I'll take this kid. Apparently it's just really easy to get orphans in Anne Rice's world. So he just like picks up this kid. He's like, hey, you're my sister's helper now. Because Sibel, she was a concert pianist, and I don't know, she kind of comes across like she's on the spectrum, honestly, where all she wants to do is play piano. And then her brother was like her manager and stuff. And one day she was going to have this huge like performance. Her parents were going to go. The parents, her brother, and her were all in the car. And there was a big accident and both the parents died. And she like mentally could not handle this. So all she does all day is play the Appassionata. That's all she plays all day, every day, because she's mentally traumatized. And the brother, he's also traumatized, but he takes to liquor and stuff and starts beating them up. And then Armand comes along, Mr. Eat Your Brother, and saves them. So hence there's all of this like devotion here. Sibel is probably about, I don't know, she's in her early to mid-20s, but we'll call her 25. And Benji is a kid. He's like 12, 13 years old. It's a weird combination of people. But anyway, Benji, he's also like a little like streetwise hustler kid. So when he said, hey, I'll find you a bad guy, no problem, what does he do? He finds him a bad guy, no problem. So he like brings him back to the house. He's like, hey, I got a bad guy. I told him we had a bunch of cocaine. Like, nailed it. So he brings over the bad guy, and Armand goes full demented vampire on him. Armand obviously eats the guy, but like he also rips out his heart like Kalima style and eats it. Like, he eats his heart. It's so the drama of it all. But after this first meal, like, Armand does start looking a little bit more human, albeit extra crispy. But he's healed enough that he's able to go off on his own a bit and try to hunt down more meals. And just remarkably, like, Sibel and Benji aren't at all fazed by like having a vampire stay with them. They're just like, oh, okay, so you eat people. Neat. Like, they're not fazed by this at all. Armand moves in with them, and they kind of are just like a little happy family. He's basically becoming their Marius. He takes care of them, he teaches them stuff, he takes care of them financially, and just having them around in their companionship, it just brings joy to his black little heart. So after he's done recuperating, it's time for him to come to New Orleans, where he is now telling the story. He comes back down here because he heard that Lestat was in a coma, like catatonic, he lost his shit. He's gonna go check up on him. They're friends now. So he and Sibel and Benji, they get to New Orleans. Everybody is super happy that Armand is still alive and didn't get like dissolved by the sun. Marius is there. They have a little like, meeting with each other because that's like a whole thing. And so he comes and he checks on Lestat, and Lestat is just catatonic, but he won't let anyone come near him. He will like vampire attack anybody comes near him. However, doesn't attack Armand. They have like a bond. So Armand just comes and they have like a little cuddle, and then he drinks a little bit of Lestat's blood, which is what he wanted to do in Memnoch, because Lestat drank Jesus's blood. And like Armand's like, I want to taste some Jesus blood. Could I have some of your blood? So he tastes like a little bit of Lestat's blood to like read the memories of it. See, did he really drink Jesus's blood? And the book isn't really clear on the outcome of that, of whether or not he really drank Jesus's blood. Because all Armand knows is that whoever he saw in this vision of what was happening to Lestat did not want Armand to see it. So he kind of just gets kicked out of, Lestat's mind. He doesn't get to know what really happened. So now we are officially in the present. This was the end of the story he told to David. Time for him to go back to Sibel and Benji, who have been staying with Marius at this time. Marius is like, hey, I'll take care of your humans. I will take care of them for you while you're doing your stuff with Lestat. So he goes over to Marius's house. He's going to go pick up Sibel and Benji. And once he gets there, he is just aplectic about what has happened. He's astonished and aplectic because he finds out that Marius has turned both Sibel and Benji into vampires. He's like, I left them with you for like 3 hours, for fuck's sake. So he is furious with Marius for this. It is not what he wanted for them. Even though he's becoming their Marius figure, he's a bit more altruistic in his love for them than Marius was for him, because he loved them as they were. He didn't love them because he could change them into something else or groom them. And Marius, he basically tells Armand, I did it for you. Because if you changed Sibel and Benji, they would eventually grow to hate you. Because everybody hates their maker. They would grow to hate you just like Daniel did. So I turned them for you because now you get to keep them and they won't hate you. It's kind of Marius trying to like help Armand or make amends, I guess, for a lot of the stuff that happened between them. And Armand is just still so incredibly angry and sad about this. But he just has to move on because, I mean, he's too old not to at this point. He's a very old vampire. He's like, well, what am I going to do? I can't turn them back into humans. I can't unmake them. They're vampires. I'm just going to have to move on with this, okay? And it's finally getting closer to sunrise, and someone comes and knocking on the door. Guess who it is? Lestat. He finally woke up from his like catatonic state and he came to look for them. And Lestat, he's like, hey, could Sibel play piano for me? Because I've had a rough time. And Armand's like, yeah, she'll play piano for you. So Sibel starts playing Appassionata, and then they all just kind of listen to her play piano, and the book ends. There you go, everybody. It was a lot. For very little payoff, it was a lot of like weird sex stuff. A lot of grooming, a lot of BDSM, just a lot of weird, gross sex stuff. 50 Shades of Vampires with a dash of Lolita. There you go, everybody. That's the Vampire Armand. Alright, so I read it. I read the whole thing. Did I like it? Like, parts of it were good. Like, I don't think it's poorly written. I do have problems with the content in it because, like, the consent issues in here are problematic at best. It's just a lot of weird, gross sex stuff, and it was uncomfortable to read, and I hope it's supposed to be. I don't know if this was supposed to be seen as, like, a romance, because it is, but it shouldn't be. You know, it's one of those where you're like, he's 15, yuck. So yeah, it's a lot of weird, gross sex stuff, and I'm disturbed by it, but I don't think it's a poorly written book. So it's good, but like, yikes for content. Let me know in the comments down below, have you read The Vampire Armand? And if so, what did you think about it? I don't know, there's a lot of things to talk about, frankly, about the content in this book, so let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like, and if you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe, and if you want cool exclusive content, including early access to videos and a book club, you can consider becoming a channel member or a patron, and on that note, I will see you guys soon. Bye!